Hello, welcome everyone to the Soul Connection. Melissa Culbertson here. And tonight's show is going to be a really interesting one. So just letting you know that hang on tight because you're going to learn some really cool information here about how to connect with your loved ones in your sleep through your dreams. So, soul connection, real stories from real people, people that I've helped through my medium work and self-help work. So, today my guest is Allison Frederick. We'll bring her up here. Welcome,
Hi, Melissa.
Allison.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you for saying yes and coming on here. So we met March, April, you said 2018. I couldn't remember quite, so I had to ask here before we got going. Hi, Deb. Thanks for joining us. So she came to me for a reading, then you've come for some more afterwards to hear from your dad. So through the loss of your dad and working through your grief, you came and stumbled upon, I guess you want to say, how to communicate with him through your dreams. I'm fascinated too, because I've only had one dream about my dad since he's passed. It was very, very vivid. You can tell when those are real visitations. And that's something too, when people come to see me, like, well, was it a real dream, like a real visitation, or was it just a dream? So hopefully you can give us some more insight to that too, with your experiences of how to interpret that and how to make it happen. So Allison, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, and my husband's going to pop in here. So if you see a guy coming in, it's okay. Yeah. He's just picking up my son from track. So
sounds good. I might have a little 3-year-old that pops in here too.
Okay.
Yeah. So I am born and raised here in Dubuque, Iowa. Grew up here, went to Hempstead, moved down to South Florida, Fort Lauderdale area to finish college, got my MBA, started my career. And then I was like, turned 30 and I was like, what the heck am I doing with my life? So I actually never thought I'd move back to Iowa, but I did. And then that was 10 years ago, which is crazy to believe that it was 10 years ago. So I started working at IBM, and then I was shifted into McGraw-Hill, and I'm an adjunct instructor as well. So I teach a variety of marketing courses at Southern New Hampshire University. And I teach right now, I work full-time right now for a company called Workiva. So I'm in there, I'm a director of marketing and advertising for a tech company, which I love. It allows me to work from home and I get to travel, and it's great. So, but yeah, so you were mentioning coming to see you. So we, back in 2018, well, prior to that, we struggled to conceive like many couples. So it took us over 4 years to have our daughter, Palmer. And we experienced a loss that I would never wish upon anyone else. So we had to unfortunately terminate for medical reasons. And so what drew me to you, Melissa, was to just like find some like meaning in all of that. And so I had my reading with you, and it was just like mind blowing. It was so awesome. But it sort of like sparked a number of things that started happening in and around me, like during that time of trying to conceive, to having loss. We ended up losing my grandfather around the same time as my dad passed away. So being able to like, I would say that, I don't know, conjure is the right word, but being able to like channel them in dreams really started to ramp once my dad passed away. But I've kind of like all my life have had like night terrors, sleep paralysis. I've had dream visits with loved ones, but not as frequent as I do now. But from when I was young till now, I've kind of learned some like tools to help me get out of a night terror. So, and part of that is realizing when I'm in a dream. So there'll be an indicator. So if I'm in a dream, and usually in night terror, it's literally real life. Like you are in your home, things are happening the way that it would normally happen. But then something strange happens. And normally in my night terror, somebody's like breaking in the house. That's generally what my repeat night terror is. And I can't move or whatnot. So what I'll do is I'll like pinch myself, and I'll like see like if I can feel like right now I can feel myself pinching. And if my dream, you can't. So then I go, okay, I'm dreaming. This is just a night terror. Now you have to wake yourself up. So those are some of the like techniques that I learned early on. And so, and that's just kind of just from research, like just from reading about how I can like navigate them and get out of them. Normally it's like when I fall fall asleep on my back, and my sister suffers from these too. If you fall asleep on your back, you're actually more prone to have night terrors, believe it or not.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and usually at times of like stress. So, so I learned that technique like early on. So when I, after losing my dad, the dream visits started immediately. Like it was within the first couple days that he passed, and even after the funeral. I took that technique of like learning, look, am I sleeping? Is this real? Is he really looking at me and we're really talking? And I'll be like pinching myself and I'll be like, oh my gosh, no, this is you. Like, you look so real. You look great. So I started just like honing in on that, like taking control of my dream in that moment. So the other indicator that I started to refine lately is what's in my dream. It's always my phone that never works. And so you guys might be in like a dream, it's like, you know, like the light, I don't know, like there's something that just never works right. And so I might go to the phone and it might be like a weird dream. And I try to dial like 911 or trying to dial somebody or take a phone or take a picture of my phone, and the phone doesn't work. Like I could never get it to work. And usually that's like my like indicator that I'm dreaming. And then I go, okay, I'm dreaming. Let me pinch myself. And then, okay. And then I go, all right, let me look for dad. So then I just kind of like scan around in the dream world and I like look for my dad, and he's usually there. I have conversations with my brother on this. Like he's usually just like kind of in the wings. Like they're just always hanging out, like never wanting to like interrupt like what you're dreaming about or anything like that. But he's always like doing a crossword puzzle or like reading a newspaper, or just kind of like hanging out. And it's kind of like up to me to go see him. So it's always that initiative. And so that usually prompts it. And so then I'll usually just like run over to him and be like, dad, you know, like, and then normally it's been like, I don't know what to say, you know, like there's so much going on. And that's usually just, it's such a quick visit that it's usually just like, I love you, I miss you, and I'll hug you, you know. So, and it's usually just very much just that, because honestly, of all the things that I'd want to say to him, it would be that, you know. So I mean, there's like so many, I've again over 50 dreams that I started documenting. I started writing them down almost immediately, but then I just started counting and I was like, oh my gosh, like, because he passed away in December of 2020. And so that first year was so many. And then some weeks it would be 3 nights in a row, 4 nights in a row. And I just chalked it up to like, he'd gone so suddenly that I think that in part he didn't have an opportunity to say what he wanted to say in the end, right? So I think that in a way that it was sort of like him trying to like get the last like a few words out, you know. So and then I've always sort of read that like there's this stop, and this is obviously just my opinion, right? That there's just this stop point between your ever after heaven. Right. So it's not purgatory, but it's this period of time where like you're doing your life review, and it could take as little or as long as you need. And at that point in time, it's like, I feel like that's his point in time right now. And so when I was having the dream visits and he was coming a lot, he was doing his life review. And it, you know, he could have been visiting my siblings too. They just obviously maybe not remembering, or others. You know, so, but that slowed down since then. So it just tells me that he's probably settling in more and more into his sort of ever after heaven kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
so we do have some pictures of your dad, just so we can, you know, everybody can see your dad who we're talking about. So yeah, if we can get those up and just share a little bit about our dad too. Like, what was he like when he was here? He's just so cute. Such a
yeah, so that's my dad, Steve Hodge. He wow, he's such an awesome person. That's obviously my wedding day. He was born and raised here in Dubuque, went to University of Iowa for law school. He was the chief public defender here in Dubuque. Yep, that's him in the courtroom. Spent the brunt of his career in public service. He always had a special place in his heart for sort of the underserved and underprivileged. Oh, definitely. Oh, that's awesome, Deb. I'm so excited to hear that. She said
yes, that's so cool. She knows everybody, I think.
It's kind of, it's just one of those things. It's like would walk into a place with my dad, and he'd be like, no, like half the people there, and people still come up to me and say, oh, you're Haji's daughter. You know, I knew your dad. Yeah. And then this is just a picture of my dad with my brother, and then our 2 dogs. Yeah, we love the doggies.
I know.
He was
that reminds me so much of you.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. Oh.
Yeah. And that's my dad with Palmer, who is now like hijacking our meeting here. Yeah, that's when Palmer was a baby.
Oh, hi, Palmer.
Hi, Palmer.
Yeah, Daddy's coming. Yes. So, great, fantastic guy. You know, always just advocating for those less fortunate. Hold on one second. I know.
Yeah. Hi, Candy. Hi, Derek. Thanks for coming on, guys. So, how long did you say after your? Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, you're fine. How long did you say, like, after your dad's passing, did you start having visits?
Immediately. So I think, right away. And I remember, and it's very deep here, but I remember like even at the very end of life, holding his hand, telling him, come visit me in my dreams. Like, send us signs. I'm going to cry. Send us signs. Like, I'm open to it. You know, like I'm here, I'm listening, I'm watching, I'm waiting. So, yeah. And it was almost immediately. So it was, gosh, I wrote them down. They were like,
hi, Penny.
Just running through the neighborhood at his home, and we were packing things up. Like one of the first dreams we had was we were in the kitchen. We were in the kitchen that day going through all the cards from the service, and you know, there was pizza. The house was a disaster. My dad would have been so mad, but and it was just crazy. But I mean, it was at the end of the day of a funeral. You know, we were going through all the cards, and I had a dream that night. We were in that same kitchen. He was sitting there at the kitchen table bar, and he's just telling me that he's like, I'm just so sorry that you guys have to go through this. Like he was like acknowledging like what a hard time. Sorry.
Oh no, never apologize for those tears.
So and then so many, like we were selling his house, and it felt like it was happening, and then it wasn't, and it was just kind of, you know, one thing after the next. But then I had a dream, and we finally had sold it, and I remember we were walking through the house, and I was like, Dad, like, we finally sold the house. And he goes, oh, I'm so excited that you guys don't have to worry about that anymore. Like he's like, so in the dreams at that time, he was so attuned to what was going on, like with me and my siblings and what we were trying to do with all those things, you know? So yeah, it was pretty wild. And then even for things like to this day, you know, like I remember having a conversation with my brother about regrets. And I know that there's like, nobody should have regrets in life, but like, I mean, come on, we have regrets. We're humans, right? It shows growth. And that night, my dad came to me in a dream, and he shakes his finger at me and he goes, you need to stop worrying about the past. You need to be excited about the future. And he was just like dead right in my eyes and said that. And a month later, we found out we were pregnant. So naturally, so if you remember earlier, I was saying we had such a hard time with our first, well, we were surprised with our second. And I guarantee you my dad had something to do with that. And and he similarly did it at another time. Cause I just remember early on, and those that have lost close loved ones, obviously suddenly is like, are they okay? You know, like, what are you doing up there? You know, like, I mean, are you know what I mean? Like, you know, they're okay, but it's just like, it's just kind of like he went on a trip, you know, and I haven't heard from him, and I just want to know he's okay. And I had a dream, and he was like, you need to stop worrying about me. Like, I'm okay. I'm fine. You know? And I was just like, oh my gosh, like it was just very cool to have that like validation that like, this is real. This is not some wild, weird dream, or I'm making it up, but it was so real. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So, do you think this has really helped you process through his passing too, with your grief?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think that in a weird way, I feel closer to him. And one thing that as I was thinking about this show was, if you wanted to try and, bring forth a loved one, I go to bed, obviously very excited. I want to talk to him every single night, but I don't, it doesn't happen every night, even though I do ask him. In fact, it probably happens. It doesn't happen as often as I ask. Right. And then what really is like, they come when you need it the most, not when you want it. So one thing that I found out was, as I'm going through grief and processing this is, and I might have a dad visit that I go, gosh, you know what? I really needed that. And like, you feel it, like maybe sometimes you're like going on with life and it's like humming and it's great. But then all of a sudden you have a dream visit and you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize how much I needed that, so it's just something to keep in mind. Like if you're starting to think about how you might bring forth a loved one in a dream, like, and the other tip too, that I wanted to make sure I shared was, ask them out loud. Like that's another thing. I would ask him like, Dad, like, will you come visit me in my dreams? Like, I'm open to it. Like, I'm here. I'm here. I will receive it. Come visit me in my dreams. You just have to invite them in. And I've read a lot on it. And I just read that as a tip and I started trying it. And so that seemed to have worked on some of them. So if you invite them in, then they feel like they're not imposing on your dreams. Right. Okay, so you always got to ask them. The other thing too, is that we obviously dream thousands of dreams a night, right? And so even though you might be having a dream, you may not remember it, right? So they may already be visiting you. The key is to tell them that they need to wake you up, like immediately.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Wake you up.
Wake you up immediately. And when you do, you got to write it down because you don't want to take for granted the fact they're going to remember it. Right. So you might go, gosh, I feel like I had a dream last night, but I can't remember it. So you just got to like write it down or write down some things that'll trigger it. And that goes kind of back to earlier when I was saying about the indicators. Right. So once you know you're dreaming, in that same conversation, you have to say, you got to wake me up. Or when you're asking them to visit you, like, Dad, please come visit me tonight in my dreams, but don't forget you need to wake me up so that I can remember it. So that's kind of like a really key point of that. Otherwise, they're probably like, well, yeah, we talk all the time in your dreams, it's just like, you got to remember it. And again, and write it down. So there's just a couple of things there that, and I remember one time too, I had a very, I could look it up, but this conversation with my dad, and I told him in that moment, I was like, it was sad, but I was like, Dad, you're going to have to wake me up now. So it was just like that. And of course I woke up, so that's just another one you got to kind of remember. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry about that. I had a little cold.
No, you're good.
Coughing spell.
Oh, I know. I get those dreams with loved ones or whatever. It's like, and I don't have them very often. I don't even talk. I just like, it's like you're going through the process of the dream and I'm just like, you're getting a hug. I don't care. I'm like, I'm hugging you. I don't care what our conversation is.
Yes, exactly. And honestly, the other thing too is like when you are asking them, because there's so much you probably want to talk about, right? And then, and it doesn't happen very often. So it's almost like you have to have what you want to ask them ready. So I always kind of say, I know I want to say I love you. That's a given. It's going to say. So when I was pregnant with our surprise, our little oopsie, I wanted to tell him, right? And so in my dream, I said, Dad, did you know we're pregnant? And he would be like, yeah, I knew. That's great. So he would acknowledge that like he did know that I was pregnant. And then at another time when we found out it was a girl, I was like, Dad, did you know that it was a girl? Like it's a girl, we're having a girl. So I knew that it was like one thing I wanted to tell him to make sure that it got across in the dream. So it wasn't just, and then of course it was like, I love you and, I miss you and that sort of thing. So kind of like have one thing like in your mind ready to say, like ask them or tell them. So.
Okay. So the key is basically getting yourself prepared. So before you go to bed, get yourself prepared and keep that, notebook by your bed to, journal anything. And I think that's a really good point that you bring up too, that, we have so many dreams every night and, we don't remember and we probably are dreaming about our loved ones. So hopefully that's going to give some people hope out there too, knowing that, you are being visited. Because I guess I've always just kind of, because I've read this somewhere that, if you don't dream about them, there's a block because of your own grief, but not necessarily so. So
yeah, no, I mean, my husband doesn't dream. At least he claims he doesn't. And I was like, yeah, you do. You just don't remember it. And he's had a few dreams, like with his grandpa, and then like he had a dream about his grandpa, and then his niece had the same exact dream that same week, and it was just very chilling. But that was like literally the only time that he had. But that was enough for him to be convinced that like, hey, that was real. And it was crazy that my niece had the same exact dream during the same exact time period. And we've experienced that too, me and my siblings too. So
that is
it's
awesome.
It's wild. I mean, and one thing that's cool too is that like when you go to sleep, like your brain kind of shuts down, right? Like you're not like when you're awake, you're not thinking about like when you're sleeping, you're not thinking about like what you have to do at work or like what you got going on this weekend or whatever. You really just are asleep. And so that's the prime time for your mind to be open to the visitation. So as long as you're open to it and you're going forth and like, cool, like I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to set up some techniques like beforehand so that I can be attuned to like when it does happen for me. Right.
Yeah.
So, and not every night. So like, I'll know that I'm dreaming, but not every night can I make them click. Meaning like I can't, if I go, okay, I know I'm dreaming, let me look for my dad. And then I kind of like, I'm off to another dream, so not every time does it connect either, it's just going to have to keep working on it. So, yeah.
So like you said, he's given you a lot of helpful advice. You kind of shared some of that, but like anything like really stick out to you, very profound, like for the living here.
Yeah, for the living. Yeah. So that's funny. So, in the early stages, I was really curious about what it was like in the afterlife. And so I remember, asking him, we were standing outside in front of in the driveway at his house. And if you're familiar with where he used to live, people that are on the call, in the driveway. And I was like, Dad. And he was like, yes. And I was like, what is it like up there? And he like turns around and he looks at the stars and his arms go wide. And he's like, it's incredibly miraculous. And that's like exactly like his like language. Like that's the type of like words that he would use, but it was just so undescribable, that he just said it was just incredibly miraculous. And so on another occasion, he said that he's with like some of the dogs. So there was like, we had several dogs growing up and he'd be like, me and Reggie were walking the golf course, or, Moses and Daffy are with me, so he'll acknowledge like dogs that we had when we were growing up, and so he'll talk about that. I mean, it's just like, just some of that, like he was just describing on how perfect it is, I will say I did have a sinister dream once, and this is worth mentioning too, because I followed all of my protocol. I followed my steps, and it was my dad, but it turned out to be somebody malicious and not my dad. Somebody I never met, just different. And I asked who I thought was my dad. I was like, Dad, like, tell me more about the afterlife. Tell me more about it. And the guy turns around and he just yells at me. And he's like, I told you I can't talk about that. He was just like very mean, very in my face. And I got this terrible, awful feeling. And I was like, okay, I might be in a night terror, so I had to like find a way out of it. But and that was really the only time. He's never come across anyway other than lovely. So yes, but that, and then obviously the advice around like, focus on the future, that always just struck me, and obviously don't dwell on the past. And he's fine. He's totally fine, So
So does he bring anybody else with him when you
great
see
question.
him?
Yeah, great question. So yes and no. They will be kind of around at the same time. So on a few occasions, there was a wedding we were all at, and he was there, and then like my grandpa was there, who's passed away, his dad, and my grandma, his mother, were there as well, and they were very much there. I mean, it was them, right? I mean, I was definitely having like a full-on family visitation, and so he's there with them. And similarly with my grandfather who passed away on my mom's side of the family, one of the very first dreams that I had was one of the very first, I saw my grandpa pulling up in a car, and he was wearing one of those like old man kind of like hats. I don't know how to describe it, but like an old man hat. And he kind of gets out of the car and he's like going to come into my house. And I said, "Hey, Grandpa, like come in for a beer." And he goes, "Oh, I can only stay for one. I got other people to go visit." And I was like, "Okay, then come on in," you know? And as he's like walking into the house, my dad zips right in front of him, and he's like tan and he's wearing his like favorite like outfit he would golf in, and he just like beelines it in front of my grandpa but into my backyard. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I like run out and I was like, dad, and he like stops, and behind him is like this white bright light, and that's what if I'm looking at my backyard, it was just white bright light. And and he's standing there, and I was just like shocked because I was like I didn't know what to do. It was very early. I mean, here's my dad. He looks great. He's tan. He's healthy. He's happy. And he was like running. And I'm just like, "Dad, I love you." And he goes, "I love you too." And he was like, takes off, you know? So, and I was like, okay, like, I guess that's it. I'm going to go talk to Grandpa
things
now.
to do.
Yeah. You know, that's just, I mean, that's what it was. I mean, but yeah, I mean, again, like one thing that I've just learned is like, they're always there. You know, like I feel like they're always there. And you just have to take a minute if you can first establish an indicator, right? Like to acknowledge that you're dreaming. That's the key, right? And then to just look, right? And then just like take a second to like look to see who's like there. A lot of times in your dreams that like I've always heard that if you can't really recognize their faces or they're kind of fuzzy, they're really just generally people that you haven't met yet. But honestly, like if you see people, like you will see your loved ones. Like I wholeheartedly believe that they're all there. It's somewhere. So yeah.
Yeah.
So when you see him, is he the same age, like the same time, or is it different levels or different times or different ages or?
Yeah, great question. He's actually always around the same age. So probably within 10 years, but he looked like just so happy, so healthy. He was a big golfer. He loved the hottest of the hottest days. And so he would be just at the golf course or, you know, just coming off the golf course, just tan, just happy, just drinking his Coors Light. And that's just kind of, I feel like just kind of how he probably wants me to remember him mostly, you know? There was one time I had a dream where he was playing basketball, but he was much younger. And he wasn't all that good. He was like, I love basketball, so I'm just going to play. But he was a lot younger. I didn't really recognize him at that stage, you know? So yeah. But
it's probably like, you could dream me to be a little bit better at this.
Yeah. Right. I know. Right. That's not. Yeah. But like the recurring dreams that I personally have, like I play volleyball. That's kind of what I do, what I did growing up. And, a lot of times I'll be playing volleyball or I'll be at like a volleyball game and then I'll like forget how to play or something weird, right? That'll happen. But I'll like see my dad and he'll be like in the stands, like watching me play. And one of the things that from you, Melissa, actually, we had a reading and you mentioned that we didn't, like him and I didn't have, like he golfed. And so like I didn't golf. So we didn't have that thing, right? But he always loved coming to watch me play, right? Like volleyball, like that was just, he loved it, right? He was our biggest cheerleaders. And so it would make sense that in my dream, like I would be, in my reoccurring dreams of playing volleyball, good or bad, he would be there, right? And he would be watching no matter what. And I had one specific dream and I was like, Dad, big game tonight. We're playing senior. And it was just like flashback to high school. And he just looked at me and he's just like, I love you. I miss you, you know? And I was like, oh, that to me felt like he was trying to like get at me in my dream versus me going after him. So, yeah.
So like, there's probably some skeptical people maybe listening too.
Probably.
What would you say to people that are maybe skeptical? Like, well, maybe she is just dreaming, or these are your own thoughts, or like, you know,
or she's just really grieving. You know, it's kind of one of those things that like, it has to happen to you. Sometimes people don't want to admit like what it could be. you know?
Right.
So, and I think like the unknown can be very scary, and it might be like a trigger word for people, but if you start to think about it and you start to think about what happens after our life, you're like, oh, let's hold the brakes here. Like that's really deep. I don't want to go there. You know, I don't want to go there yet. I'm just focusing on what's in front of me in the next couple of years. Right. Yeah. So I just think that if it happens to you, it's almost like having a paranormal type experience. I think once it happens to you, you sort of become a believer. Right. And I just say like, just be open-minded to it because it could happen, you know, and it might be a loved one trying to come say hi. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That was my first experience with that. In high school, had 3 girls see them in a car accident, and there they were with me, like right when I finally fell asleep, and
wow.
Yeah.
So that from that point on, I'm like, oh yeah, I know it's them. So for any time I have a dream of a loved one that's passed, so.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that story. I think it would tie in good to this too, because like what happened. So.
Oh, it would have been. Oh, it was a Good Friday. I graduated in '92, so that's how long ago it was. And I was coming home from a movie, and there were my 3 friends in the ditch in a Mustang, and of course, shock hits you right away. I wasn't processing anything, and I'm just like thinking, oh, they're just probably knocked unconscious because that's what happens on TV, right? They're just so, and then it took forever, and that was back in the day before cell phones. I had to go to some house and call my parents and say, hey, I'm going to be late. I'm okay, but my friends aren't going to be okay. And then I went home that night. I couldn't. You can't sleep. You can't sleep because you're constantly worried about it. And then I finally fell asleep. And it was the 3 girls standing there just talking to me. I'm like, hey, nope, everything's cool. We're okay. Everything's good. And all of a sudden I could hear the phone ring. And back then it was just like the phone rang at 4 a.m. It was never good. And that's what the phone call was. And I'll never forget that.
That they had passed away.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. They see, like, I believe that they knew you needed that.
Yeah.
You know, like otherwise you probably would have been like, what could I have done? Like, sort of like hung on to that like forever. That's incredible. Have you had any more of those visitations since from them?
Like I used to have them a lot, like constantly. Like when somebody would pass, I would know, I would see, they would come to me like almost immediately.
Wow.
Like she had a cousin that passed, and I was good friends with her. She would come constantly. Now it's kind of every once in a while. Like when my grandpa's died, it kind of slowed down, maybe because it was more of a personal level. So anytime I see them, that's why, like I said, I run and I just hug them. Like her, even her dad, I barely. And I know her dad's like always kind of around, but like, if they pop in my dream, and then like, that's right away. I know, all right, I know I'm dreaming. I know you're not. And I just go.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. I love to hear that. So do you have an indicator in your dreams?
No, there's sometimes I could kind of click, and sometimes, but then I kind of, when I do it, I usually end up waking up. Like if I know I'm dreaming, I kind of wake up, but she's heard me a few times with sleep paralysis.
He's a big like superhero guy. So he'll have dreams that he's like got superpowers and stuff, and he can control that stuff in his dreams. I'm like, how can you do that?
And like if I had a dream somebody's breaking the house, I'm like, oh, it's on.
Cool.
That's the first thing I do is I fly. But I don't think to look around like my loved ones being around. I don't even think that. I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna fly. I'm just gonna take off, and then I realize I'm afraid of heights a little bit. So,
well, next time you just take a scan, like around, and just see who's hanging out in the wings.
That's awesome. I never thought of that either. Like that is so cool. Sally says, I think you're doubly blessed to have had such a loving father in both life and even in his death. Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So now it's like I really just am more attuned to like just signs from him, and I'm sure others could probably empathize too. Like he always had like a jar of quarters, and it wasn't just any jar. I mean, it was a jar, and and he would always hide it. He'd always hide it from us because we'd like stick our hand in the quarter jar and like put it in our pocket. So to grab a couple bucks. So when I said like at the end, I was like, Dad, like, send us signs, like visit me in my dreams. Like I'm open to it. I would find like random quarters, how you find like the pennies, and it's like the pennies from heaven kind of concept. Well, it's like he would send quarters. So I was like, great. I just sent a couple bucks too. But it'd always be like, in the weirdest places, and that's kind of what the indicator is. Like, you'd see like a quarter, I don't know, somewhere random underneath your pillowcase. I don't know. But yeah, he would send quarters. So that's kind of like, oh, got it, Dad, you know? So yeah, I mean, like I said, it's slowed down a bit, but I'm okay with it because I feel like he's probably feeling a little bit more comfortable, and maybe it's me that's feeling a little bit more comfortable, and so maybe that's kind of what it is. Obviously, the dream visits align usually with something that's going on, and so in the beginning of obviously his passing, there was a lot going on, you know. So yeah.
So we did have a few more people pop on since we've been here. Maybe kind of go through again, like those steps, 6 steps of like how to connect with your loved ones through your dreams.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, you have to ask them to come visit you. So it has to be out loud. So, you know, for example, like, I love and miss you, Dad. Please come visit me in my dreams tonight. Don't forget that you have to wake me up, you know, or something of that version, right? So just inviting them into your dreams out loud, they can hear you. So that's like first and foremost.
Wake you up, right? When you're in the dream.
Exactly. You got to wake me up right after so that I remember it. Have a question in mind, right? Or something that you want to say. So, so that when you're there, it goes very quickly. So you're not sort of like stuck, you know, not sure what to say. So kind of like already have something ready to say, like, you know, like got a promotion, or, you know, the kid is now walking, whatever, like something that you want to say. So then the next one would be identify an indicator, and make this something that will always be your indicator. So like for me, my phone never works in my dreams. It just never works, right? I've tried to take a picture, or I'll try to call 911, or I'll try to do anything with text. I can't get it to work. And then I usually go, okay, my phone is not working. And then I'm going to pinch myself just to make sure. So I learned this trick long ago when I was having night terrors as a kid. So you just pinch yourself. And if you can't feel it, well, then you're sleeping. So then you sort of have that indicator, right? And
I kind of but that, like, I'm like, how do you get that one down? To me, that seems like that would be one of the hardest things to do, is to pinch yourself when you're sleeping. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know.
I mean, it took a while, but it's just natural now. Like it just happens, right? So especially when I was in night terrors, because it felt so real. So for me, it was like, okay, this is real life, but then something weird is happening. Like I have to make sure that I'm either dreaming or not. And sometimes, I mean, I'd be like, gosh, dang it, this day is shitty. Like, I'm just going to pinch myself. No, I'm awake. So yeah. So the indicator is like crucial, right? Because that'll be the trigger in your dreams to then be able to go, okay, I'm dreaming. Let me scan the room. And so then that allows you to kind of just like take a minute and look, right? And so, because I was saying earlier, like they're there. Like my dad he's just there. He's always there, you know? So he's either like in the corner reading a newspaper, or doing a crossword puzzle, or having a coffee or beer or whatever. He's just kind of always there. He's just never gonna full on come forward and come into my dreams without me asking him to, right? So there's a couple of things you have to do in order to do that, but scan the room. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? So, so scan the room, indicator, ask out loud. And then you obviously have to tell them at some point, either it's upon asking them to come or in the dream, that they need to wake you up. Like that's a very important piece, because you'll have thousands of dreams a night, and you may already be having dream visits. You just don't remember them because you're not waking up. So, that's critical, right? And then I didn't mention this earlier, but thank them. Right. So when I wake up and I write it down, I keep it in my notes app in my phone. I thank my dad. And usually I just say, I either got a tear or something, but it's just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming to visit. Like, thank you, you know, so they know like, oh, great, it worked, you know, like she remembered it. Right. And I think that's key too. So then you can obviously just keep building on that as you improve it over time. And write it down, right? Like that'll also help. Like I can't recall dream number 25 or dream number 29, but I go through my notes, and when I read them, I'll start to remember them. And that's honestly a blessing in and of itself, Like if I don't have any more dream visits the rest of my life, I can go back to those and get enough from them. Right. So never take for granted that you're going to remember it. Just write it down. Even if there's any, just like a few tidbits, like of what it was, and then just leave it at that. Cause then you just let your memory kind of like kickstart again. So, and then the other one too is like, just be open-minded. And we were talking about this about, maybe the skeptics, right? Like if you go into it skeptical, it's not going to happen. Like
right.
You're already closed off. Yeah. They're just being like, okay, you don't want to dream visit. Got it. So it's just like being open to it and just like allowing it to happen. Maybe just be like, could it happen? And then let your brain kind of settle and then see what happens. So yeah.
Sounds like Inception. I don't know if you said spin on the top. Mine is if I can't read something.
Sure.
Usually I know, but I must not read a lot in my dreams if I don't catch on. But if I can't read it, I'm like, I know I can read.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. So that's how I.
For sure. Yep.
So do you get to have like full conversations with your dad too? And what are those like?
Yeah. So we've had, so here's the point when it's like, don't take for granted, right? So I had a couple, and normally they go pretty quickly, right? Like normally they go really quickly and then I wake up. I do remember one time where I was riding a bike up Hillcrest. So if anybody here is familiar with Hillcrest Street and you turn left on Rosemont, I was climbing up Hillcrest because it's a steep climb. And I turned left to go home and there's a big party going on in like a backyard. Like they're having like a bonfire and my dad's there, other relatives that have passed are there. And so it's just kind of like family reunion, but in somebody else's backyard. So I was like, this is weird. I'm obviously dreaming. And so, I looked for my dad and he comes forward. He's actually talking to the crowd. He's like, he's a showman, right? So he's just like telling a story or something. He's working the crowd. And so he comes off and we start talking and I'm literally looking at him and we're talking. And I'm telling myself, oh, I'm going to remember this. I'm totally going to remember this. I'm remembering this. And I know he was talking to me about something because he was so intent on what he was saying that I just couldn't remember I couldn't remember when I woke up what he was saying. Right. Okay, and so I know that he was telling me something of substance. But obviously I wasn't meant to retain that knowledge or I just didn't remember it. But so yes, so that's full on conversation. Back to that one about me not regretting the past. Right. It just kind of there was more to that story in the sense that like, I was telling him of things that I regretted that I did with him, like, whatever, growing up in life, teenager, all that. And so he wanted to make sure that I wasn't holding on to that because he's passed. So we spent a good amount of time talking in that dream about like, listen, I'll never stop loving you. He was saying these things like, I never stop loving you. Like, it doesn't matter. Like none of that matters, like, let it go. Right. Like it's holding you back. So he was like, giving me that like acknowledgement of like the things that I think maybe I needed to hear. But yeah, I mean, we got into some of that and honestly, even though I still maintain that you can have regrets in life, I don't hang on to it. Right. Like I think I'm doing my best to kind of get over it. And I think he's helped me through it, through the dreams. So.
Yeah. And that's one big thing too, with readings I get is just like, not holding on to all those things. Cause where they're going, it doesn't matter anymore. And they want us to have our best life here, know?
Yeah.
And, I think it's interesting too, that you talk about the time and like, well, it went really quick. Well, what is quick over there though? Like, was it an hour, but it felt like 2 minutes? Like, I just find that fascinating too. Cause I feel that way in my readings. I'm like, I feel like I just closed my eyes. I started channeling and then the timer's going off. So it's just, there's definitely like in that dimension where they are, time is definitely different.
Yeah. And I believe that. And I think if you pay attention to any of like articles that are out, or other podcasts, even movies, I think Matthew McConaughey did one. The name escapes me. Anyway, they're living in another dimension, right? It's so where they live is like, there's no concept of time. That's like not even a thing.
Yeah.
And so, and that's hard to grasp a little bit, right? So he could be in this, like, he could be on the golf course at all times, but none of that is ever going to be time related, right? Like it's just, he's just there. Right. And so I often, in the beginning, when I was struggling to accept that he was gone and he wasn't just on a trip, I was worried. I was like, what are you doing? Like, are you okay? Like, do you need me to go get your mail? Like, I don't, it's just like, cause he would go to Florida and he'd be gone and I would like take care of his house here. And I would just be like that. I'd be like, are you keeping busy? Like, are you staying out of trouble? So I don't know. And that's when he came to me in that dream and was like, you need to stop worrying about me.
Yeah.
So I'm just fine.
Has he told you about like any of his dream or like any of his jobs that he does or what he like, I don't know. I feel like we have a purpose on the other side too, and a lot of it mirrors what we do here. And it's interesting to hear what different people are doing. And I feel like it's it's fluid. It can change too for them depending on what's needed, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't gotten any indication that he's doing it. Listen, he retired and he was in retirement and the poor guy, he didn't live very long into retirement, so I doubt he wants to work.
Yeah, he's enjoying himself. Like, yeah.
But in all seriousness,
playing basketball.
Yeah, exactly. But in all seriousness, though, like I did when I had my very first reading with you, Melissa, and it was just like it floored me. I was, you had said that my grandmother, Grandma Hodge, she came forward first and foremost, and she couldn't stay long because she had work to do, and she had gotten her like angel wings. She was like basically an angel on the other side, and so she was going to like help others with whatever they needed to do. So she ended up having a job at that point in time, but that was something that came through when we had that reading with my grandmother. So, yeah.
And I always say too, like those that earn their wings and they show that too, like they were like the really selfless people here on earth. They just gave up of themselves so much because what I get from the other side is like to raise your vibration so much to become like this angelic being. Like it takes a lot. So not everybody that crosses over gets to be the angel, so to speak. So that's pretty cool that your grandma earned her wings.
I wouldn't doubt it. She had a big soul as well. And back on the regrets thing too, like I remember my dad saying, he had regrets in life too. And he was like, gosh, I have regrets. Boy, do I have regrets, so, and he's just like, you got to let it go. Right. Like, and honestly, that's probably why, like it probably took some time to get settled in is like, he had to get through his life review. He had to get through those regrets. And now that he can now earn some wings because he obviously lived for others, during his life here. So, yeah.
So is that something you think you can work through with him on the other side is like, well, how do you do all that? How do you get rid of your regrets on the other side? Because in my readings, they don't always like indicate like how that process works on the other side. I'm curious to like what kind of schooling or what they do to right their wrongs and all that over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't have the answer. I will add it to my list of things to ask him. But
I know.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 of this. But I will say that like of the things that I've been researching, because I kind of went down a rabbit hole on these things. And that period of time when you do the life review, it is like a movie, right? It plays back. And remember, time is not a thing. So it just, you play it back, you come to terms with all the good, all the bad, all the ugly, right? And how you impacted someone's life in a good or a bad way. And you kind of just have to face it and accept it. And then once you kind of let all that go and accept all the goodness, then you feel like you can go, no matter how long that takes, right? So I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that actually speaks to how we live our lives today. So if you were to say, all right, at the end of life, if I have to go through a life review, am I going to feel good? How long is this going to take? how
Yeah.
long is this life review going to take? Right.
Yeah.
And I, obviously it could take some time. So it might just it might put in a precedent for yourself moving forward. Like, you know what?
Mhm.
I think I'm just going to lead with kindness and just keep moving on, So
Yeah.
I think that's just something to keep in mind for ourselves here.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people too at a reading, depending on what they have going on. Like, yeah, right your wrongs, do good things here when you're here. Don't, So because you're gonna have to take care of it on the other side. There, you just are.
Can't get away from it.
Yeah. Ray Ann, she's a friend of ours. I'm assigned hard labor of polishing the gates. Okay.
Oh.
I doubt
awesome.
that. You're a very kind soul, Ray Ann. So Allison, any thoughts on like writing a book on these things?
Oh, you like read in my mind, Melissa.
Well, that's my job.
Yes, I do want to write a book. Is there anybody here that wants to help me do it? So one thing that I did was kicking around was taking my journal entries as more like a guide, right? Like that in that first year of grief, after losing a loved one, pulling in some of the lessons and the experiences I had with my dad through dreams to help me process that grief. And that first year, that's just usually just the hardest.
Yeah.
And I just kind of have to like swizzle it in a way that I feel like makes sense and use it as like an actual tactical book that you could use. I just kind of haven't figured out my approach, but yes, I do want to write a book about the dream visits and kind of how to use that as a way to get through your grief. So
yeah, I think that would be a great tool for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm just even curious too of like even as I think about our meditation studio, how people could utilize their meditations for visits as well. Like I always tell people, set your intention. Well, maybe it's setting your intention to visit with your loved one in that time too, for those that are, experiencing, grief and trying to navigate through that. So that's really inspired me for that too. Thank you. Maybe we need to do a special meditation for that or something. That'd be cool.
Because that's why I asked the age question, because I was meditating and asked about my spirit guides, and there was my grandpa, but he was probably in his 20s. Just like, so I was like, oh, this is different, but it was funny because you could tell the old mutton chops and
yes. He more or less would come in within 10 years of what he looked like, but there were times that he would come as younger, and I was like, I don't know, for whatever reason I was like more attuned to like this phase, right, of his appearance. So yeah.
When you wake up from these dreams, have you ever I guess when I woke up from my dream for my dad, I mean, I was like, I grabbed him in the middle of the night and I'm like, I don't want to wake up. I yelled it in my sleep because my dad just hugged me and I woke up. I was like, no. And I was crying. And it was just like, is there any way to like prevent that?
It's, that's really hard. That's probably like one of the hardest parts of it, is because there was one time I could feel I was asleep, but I could feel my awake self crying. It's just the weirdest feeling. And so then when I woke up, and that was actually the same time when I told my dad, like, you're going to need to wake me up now. And I could feel myself crying, and I woke up and I was crying, and I just kind of started immediately doing it. And you have to like collect yourself for a minute of like, what just happened, and you're just crying when I'm waking up, but, I mean, it's kind of unavoidable. I mean, especially when it's almost like it's so real, and I almost a lot of times when I wake up in the middle of the night and I have a dream visit like that, I gotta go back to sleep. I gotta get back in that dream, like I gotta go back and see him. And then and 9 times out of 10 I don't, but I mean, that's just kind of how it is. I want to go back. I didn't want to stop, but I often feel like they woke you up because in order for you to remember that. And that was the time they needed for you to wake up before you entered into another dream.
Yeah. So well, that's a good point. Yeah. So you do remember. Yeah. So we do have about 5 minutes left here. So any more questions you might have, Brent?
No, I'll say, I guess for me to get my angel wings, it's going to be like that guy on the What's a Wonderful Life. Everybody's going to have to start ringing bells.
Oh, yes. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Kathy has a question here. I wonder if you can travel in your dream. Can you follow that back?
Oh gosh, that's awesome. I I don't know. I mean, I can certainly see. It's usually a moment in time. So it's like, it's usually like I'm having my dream. And whether it be like a volleyball game or a party or something, and he usually comes, does his thing, and then I sort of like wake up. So it's sort of, I've never had the option, I don't think, to like follow him, but that's like a really cool tip.
Oh, that is, yeah, that would be really,
yeah,
yeah.
just follow him around. You can't go.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you had one message for everyone or the world, what would that be?
You know what? Our loved ones are always with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you often say that, Melissa, but honestly, I've never felt closer to my dad, honestly, than I have at the height of these dreams. And knowing that like they do live on. Like it's not like, I'm a true believer in that. And I know a lot of people are skeptical, but I truly believe that his spirit and the spirit of past loved ones are somewhere else where they're thriving, right? And they can see us all the time and we can talk all the time. They're just in a different plane. You know, it's just a completely different dimension, right? And we'll get there someday, right? And I think that the dream visits are just another way to like prove that to us, you know, just to like remember that they're with us.
Yeah, yes, definitely. And like I always say, like people are definitely everybody can tune in. It's maybe how we do it. Maybe it's, you know, through your dreams or however else, how I do it, you know. But yeah, everybody has the ability to do that.
Exactly.
Kathy says that she feels closer to her dad after he's passed. So strange,
right? I mean, it's just strange.
I can relate to that. Definitely. Yeah. Rand says, great tips for tonight. Yes, awesome tips. I think everybody's like excited, like time for bed. Go.
Well, we got a big snowstorm tomorrow, so
yes. Good luck, everyone.
Yes, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing. And maybe part 2. So get to dreaming.
I know. I'll report back.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Well, look forward to talking to you again, and appreciate you coming on and sharing all this important advice and information with all of us. So you're very special. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
I'm like, what dirty word? I'm like, I didn't swear.
Thanks, Allison. Good job.
You're still on.
We're still on. All right.